All right, welcome everybody. It's great to see everybody out there today. This is another in our series of athletic virtual programming, and we've had some great engagements in the past on social conversations, and we're really excited to continue our conversations around diversity, racial justice, equity, and inclusion with another one of our virtual series this evening. This is our third event in this series, as I mentioned, and we're looking forward to hosting many, many more. I'm honored this evening to highlight our athlete ally and some members of our Columbia Athletics family. And we're especially grateful for Dr. Nich Lee Parker, who recently got his PhD from Teachers College, for moderating tonight. We're also grateful for our panelists that are joining, and Nick will introduce them once I turn the time over to him for our discussion. This is incredibly important. We're grateful for the leadership that these individuals have provided in this important area. A little bit of background about Nick. As I mentioned before, he just recently completed his PhD from Teachers College. We now refer to him as Dr. Nich Lee Parker. As many of you know, in June of 2018, our lightweight rowing team won the IRA National Championship, and Nick was named the Ivy League Coach of the Year, and he's done a remarkable job leading diversity issues amongst the IRA Coaching Association, and was recognized as the first openly gay head coach of a Division I men's program. So Nick, I appreciate you joining us tonight and moderating this important discussion, and we'll turn the time over to you. And again, thank you to our panelists for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Peter. It's so refreshing to be in an environment where we have leadership that wants to address these really central issues. And Peter, that's thanks to you. So thank you very much for taking the lead and being the leader that we've been looking for in athletics to work with these things. I'm really excited to be here tonight with these three panelists. This is a really exciting conversation because it's so important to what's happening. And so before I get to introduce them, I'd like us to just take a moment wherever you are and remember that there are so many people who have been working on inclusivity, especially for LGBTQ plus people. And just take a moment here, just a couple seconds, and think about those people and give them a little bit of respect for all the work they've done. Thank you. All right, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists here. Nora, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from and your connection to Columbia?
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Nick for inviting me, and it's nice to be back at Columbia, even though it's virtual, but somehow I can never get away. So I have long roots at Columbia, and my father taught art history at Columbia University for many years. My mother was a secretary in the Italian department, and I grew up learning how to swim in the Barnard pool. My commitment to athletics is, it's in my heart, just the way music is. I was lucky enough to play basketball for the Barnard Bears, and many of my great friendships I still have because of that. I then moved west after I got my degree in musicology, which I got at Columbia as well. I have a PhD in music history. I was lucky to get my job at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. There, about year 9, I was given the role of FAR, and that is the faculty athletic representative to the NCAA. And I did that for about 11 years. And I'd always been active in equal rights. I'm a lesbian. I was out when I was young. It was very difficult being out. Was not accepted by my family. At Barnard, it was, you sort of could be out, but couldn't. At the same time, people stayed pretty much virtually in the closet. But when I got this job at the FAR, I had tenure, and as you know, you're a doctor now. Also, Nick, when you have tenure, it's like all bets are off. And so I went to the convention to vote on behalf of Lewis and Clark College, and I went to the diversity panel in, I think it was 2000. And I was very excited because I wanted to hear everything the NCAA was doing about diversity, hiring more people of color as head coaches and administrators. And then I thought, gee, I wonder what they're doing with LGBTQ. And I waited, and nothing. There's zero about gay people at the convention. And then I remembered my background, thinking I really suffered being in a closet at Barnard College. And I just really couldn't be fully out. And so I went to the little podium, the mic, and I said, "Hi, my name's Nora. I'm the FAR. I'm a musician. And could somebody please, the panel, please explain what you're doing for all the queers out there, because we're suffering. We're suffering in the closet out here as student athletes." Hush, couldn't hear a thing. There were 600 people in the room. Nothing. So I thought, okay, I'll just sit down next to this very burly and very nice Pacific Lutheran baseball coach and everybody else. And then a little while later, somebody came to me and said, "Oh, I assure you we're doing something." Anyway, somehow I got very active, and the story goes is that the NCAA and I created the first ever panel on LGBT student athlete welfare at the convention. And Billie Jean King was there, and Martina Navratilova's people were sort of involved, and we had a very wonderful student athlete, a football player. And so began the journey of fighting for equal rights. I then started a nonprofit called SMEA, Sexual Minorities in Athletics, with my former student Andrew Holder, who was a swimmer. And we were hired to go around and give talks about LGBTQ. I can just tell you that we were not met with open arms. I mean, sometimes the people, when we gave a talk, they would just turn their backs. Like we were talking, and suddenly, like the front row had their backs to us. Or the other goodie was when we hand out a little cards and said, "Any questions?" Then we'd read the little note cards and it'd be like, "Go to hell." Next, "How dare you?" "Nobody likes you." Bang, bang, bang. Or I'd be stopped in the hallway by some professor who say, "Nora, people aren't ready for this. I don't know what you're thinking, but we are not ready. So go away." So that was about 2000. So I'm just delighted that Nich and Hudson, we all need this, because, by the way, students are suffering still. This is, the homophobia in college sports is rising like all the other evil tides that are rising, because everybody's in these silos now in their own echo chambers, and within their own echo chambers comes more and more and more bigotry. So I'm just glad that this is, people are fighting for this. And I thank you very much for my time.
Thank you, Nora. Hudson, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background with Columbia and also your work with Athlete Ally?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thank you, Nich. Thank you, Nora, for that amazing, for all the work that you've done and continue to do to make sports a better place. Yeah, so my background, so I'm a wrestler. I wrestled pretty much since I was 5 years old. Has been and continues to be a really important part of my identity, my life. I think, like most athletes, sport gave me so much, right? It opened every door for me. It made me my every friend, taught me the importance of hard work, how to overcome adversity. But I think for all of the good things that I learned from sport, there was also a lot that I needed to unlearn. I really learned, I think, a very toxic, narrow form of masculinity, in part through my sport. I learned that if I wanted to be, if I wanted to uplift my masculinity, I did that through the use of homophobic and sexist slurs. And I think that's unfortunately a lesson that's still being taught to athletes in every corner of this country. I mean, because sport is sex segregated, the moment you step onto that playing field, it's boys over here, girls over there. And I think I was taught that femininity is a bad thing. And so I think for me in my journey and in Athlete Ally's work, like, homophobia is very much a weapon of sexism. And I know that how we overcome both are very much tied to one another. But I'll just say, in my journey, I was not an ally. I was not vocal on LGBTQ issues. I was not educated about the issues impacting my LGBTQ peers for the majority of my life. I think the athletic experience is a pretty insular one. On every wrestling team that I was on, I never had an out teammate. There was nobody in my life who openly identified as a member of the LGBTQ community. So as a result, it was very easy for me to not care. It was very easy for me to stay silent and not be proactive. I think there's this saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And I think in a lot of sports spaces, you don't want to be that nail that sticks out. And for most of my athletic life, the idea of speaking out as an ally or trying to combat homophobia and sexism in sport felt like I would be a nail that would stick out. And I was really afraid that I'd get hammered down by my peers, by my coaches, by the people around me. Fortunately, that started to change when I got to college. I went to University of Maryland. I was a 3-time All-American wrestler at Maryland. I got, was pretty good in my sport. So, with athletic success comes a bit of permission. I think the better I did on the wrestling mat, the more I could speak my mind and be my, really say and do what I believe. It was also unique for me because I was a Division I wrestler who happened to also be a theater kid. So, I started at Maryland as a theater major, music minor, and vocal performance. So I was a part of 2 very different worlds. One where I had a lot of LGBTQ friends in the arts who were coming out, being treated with dignity and respect, and not being seemingly put into that same narrow box that many of my athletic peers were being put in. And just the juxtaposition between those really opened my eyes. It made me realize that sport should be a place where everybody can belong, where everybody can maximize their potential and be themselves. And because of the culture of sport and our inaction when it comes to support of and including and affirming and welcoming the LGBTQ community, there's an entire population of people that is either not participating in sport to begin with, is dropping out of sport at twice the rate of their heterosexual cisgender counterparts, or if they are staying in sport, they're having a less than positive experience than their heterosexual cisgender white male counterparts. And that's a choice. That's a choice that we choose every time we don't act. We don't try to do more. So my senior year at Maryland, I decided to start speaking out as an ally by wearing an LGBTQ sticker on my headgear. Probably a couple compliance violations in the mix, but nobody bothered about it. But truth be told, I wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for that sticker, because it completely changed my life. I just thought that it was a simple statement to make, and literally, completely changed everything for me. I did an interview about wearing the sticker. About 2 days after that article ran, I opened up my email and I had over 2,000 emails from closeted athletes from across the country who said, I just read this article and I'm going to try out for my wrestling team. I'm going to go into the locker room and not be afraid. I'm going to start speaking out as an ally. And those emails, I was bawling reading them because, again, my sport has been my whole life. And I don't know who I would be if it weren't for wrestling. I would be a completely different person at a completely different place in my life if it weren't for my sport. And this idea that we are denying so many young people that same opportunity is a tragedy. It's a shame. It's shameful. And I still feel shameful about it because I love sport and I want everybody to love sport and belong in sport. But it really, that sticker made me realize if I could get that response for a sticker, if I could get other athletes to speak out, that impact would be even greater. Athlete Ally was really built on a simple philosophy that there's never been a successful social justice movement for a minority group without the support of the majority. So after Maryland, I became an assistant wrestling coach at Columbia. Go Lions. I stayed at Columbia for a couple of years working with a wrestling program there. But then, Athlete Ally kept growing and taking up more and more of my time until I eventually decided to do that full time. So Athlete Ally is now 10 years old. Was our 10-year anniversary this year. I couldn't be more proud and honored to be able to do this work in partnership with so many. We still have a lot of work to do, which we'll talk about. But I'm a proud member of the Columbia community, and I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Hudson. I know that sticker changed your life quite a bit, but I know it's changed thousands of others even more so, just for having that ability to be themselves. So thank you. Ruba, I'm so excited to have a fellow rower here on the panel. So I like that connection, but I'm really looking forward to hearing, just about your journey and your connection, and a little more about what you want to see come through Athlete Ally at Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here, and to be here alongside Hudson and Nora is such an incredible honor. And it's so exciting for me. So thank you. So yeah, my name is Ruba. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a senior at Barnard and a very proud member of the women's rowing team here at Columbia and Barnard. And the reason that I'm on this panel is because I am one of the co-presidents of the Columbia Barnard chapter of Athlete Ally, which I started with my friend and teammate Anna Clements last year. So we're very young and we're just getting started. But Anna went to a panel discussion the summer before and was so blown away by what Hudson has created with Athlete Ally, and brought me on, and we together figured this is something we really wanted to leave behind after our time at Columbia and within the athletic community. And we actually just got started. We started with a Columbia inaugural Pride Night on March 6th of last year, and then we all got sent home. But despite that, we have grown. We have a roster of over 50 student athletes and coaches, and it really is just the beginning. And it has been such an incredible opportunity for me to get to, bring forward the message of Athlete Ally and bring teammates together from across different sports at Columbia. And, the opportunities that I've had wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for the work that people like Nich, Nora, and Hudson have all done. So I'm so incredibly grateful and just really proud to be a part of a growing community. And even my experience coming out while being on a Division I team was, it's obviously hard, it's challenging, and there's so many things that you go through, whether it's with your teammates, your peers, your family. But I am so grateful for my sport and for my team. And so having the opportunity, I've been rowing for 8 years now, and the friends that I've made and the experiences that I've had have made me the person who I am today. And so I'm such a firm believer that if you can show up as your full self, you will perform better than you could have ever imagined, and the entire team will be better for it. So yes, I'm really excited for the conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruba. I would love to actually hear you go a little bit more, Ruba, and tell, because one of the things you just mentioned was the challenge of coming out, which kind of preceded even getting to the point of starting Athlete Ally. So can you just tell us a little bit about the challenges with coming out as an athlete in today's collegiate environment?
Yeah, for sure. I think my experience, obviously it's very individual for everyone. I was met with incredible support from my teammates and friends. And obviously, I'm sure there are a few people who don't know, even now, because obviously there's always a sense of wanting to stay private and safe and trying to just survive. And also it's such an interesting contrast when it comes to wanting to be your full self and bring that forward, but also understanding, that questioning whether you're doing the sport, whatever it may be, because of your physicality, and wanting to also have that shine beyond your identity. So it's a constant sort of give and take. And I think once I learned that representation really matters, whether it comes to seeing an upperclassman athlete or a coach or whatever it is, if you have people around you to reference and connect with, I can't explain how valuable that was for me, and how just in moments where I felt, even last year at Pride Night, I specifically, I was scared and I was so excited because Athlete Ally is so brilliant, but personally had struggled with being visible in that way and coming to terms with my own queer identity and what that means. And I'm sure it will be, scary for a long ways to come, but having the opportunity to be who I am on my team with Athlete Ally has just shown me that if I can push for just a little bit of change, then it's definitely worth it.
Nora, how does that compare to your experience when you were at Columbia?
Well, it's such a good question, Nick, because I was just thinking, I must be like those student athletes who are at universities like University of Oregon or University of Arkansas or something like that. It's not so safe. It's not safe. I mean, we were kind of out, but there was no mechanism to feel good about it. But I know for a fact that these big institutions, athletes can't be out. It's interesting that people are rowers and wrestlers because there are certain sports where it's a little easier. But when you're in basketball, if you're a man, or football, it's very, very difficult to be out and very dangerous. And then with women, we get that other bias, like they're all lesbians. So then there's this weird backlash where I see women playing basketball with so much hair and makeup. I'm thinking, like, how can you possibly play with all that stuff on? Just in order to present straight. So there's enormous pressure at big institutions, depending where you are in the country. And so that's probably how I felt. I didn't feel particularly safe. I would say it was all sort of clandestine, even though people knew, but it wasn't talked about.
Hudson, you've been able to work with teams from across the country and across so many different sports, and you've had some really high profile athletes who have worked with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the sport specific nature of coming out and what it means and how we can maybe do a better job of making it a good space for athletes when they do want to come out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'll say a little bit about just the landscape. So, since starting the organization, we've now visited over 300 colleges across the country. I've worked with every incoming NBA player for the past 7 years. We have worked with sport governing bodies globally, right? Like a lot of really cool, important conversations being had. That being said, these conversations are definitely happening in bluer states, they're very coastal conversations. And when we do have that conversation, the people who you want to be in the room never are. So by and large, 9 times out of 10, these discussions are optional, right? So what you end up having is the people who attend already are either members of the LGBTQ community or they are allies and they want to learn how they can be better and do more. They are not necessarily the people who are perpetuating anti-LGBTQ bias, bullying, and discrimination. So despite the sort of footprint that we have as an organization and what I think is having a very positive impact, we are still missing out on huge sectors of the athletic landscape globally, right? Like, so, that's frustrating. It's a challenge. I think it's why the long path of this education work is really, we have to eliminate geography from being able to receive more LGBTQ education. We have to focus on the people who are in positions of power. One of Athlete Ally's sort of North Stars is to make it mandatory for coaches. If you have that role and responsibility in a young person's life, you owe it to them to make sure that you are fully equipped to embrace the full diversity of your constituents. My coaches were always like father figures to me, the most important people in my life, and yet they probably knew the least out of anybody in my life about how to talk about sexuality or gender identity. And so, yeah, I think that's a huge missed opportunity, but it's totally changeable. So how do we start to change this? How do we shift that tide? I mean, some of it is happening. In 1996, the average age of a person coming out was 26. Today, that average age is probably 13. So more people are coming out younger. We still have huge drop-offs when it comes to the doorstep of sports. Only 24% of LGBTQ youth actually participate in sports, and those that do still drop out of sports at twice the rate of their heterosexual cisgender counterparts. So there's still a huge drop-off because of sports culture. I think we change that just by being more proactive, more like, basically there's this like chicken or the egg question where people are like, well, what's it gonna, like, once a huge celebrity athlete comes out, the culture is going to change and everything's going to be fine. And it's like, okay, I'm sure that will have a positive impact, and it does have a positive impact, but until we create a culture of safety and inclusion, that person and those people are not going to feel comfortable coming out, or they're not going to participate in sports. So a lot of this is about how do we proactively have the conversations, put in place the policies to make our spaces as welcoming and inclusive as possible. Basically, I think we build an inclusive culture in 3 ways. We find ways to build safety, we find ways to share vulnerability, and we align on our purpose. And there are many ways in which your policies and your practices can do those things, but really that's the ingredient of success for me, is like, we have to proactively make people feel like their team is their home and that I have your back. When I screw up, I need to own it, and we all have to own it. And we have to be very clear about what our values are as an athletic community, right? What is our ultimate purpose, and be explicit about that. I think a lot of times we talk about diversity and inclusion, and somehow the words sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression just get kind of glossed over in what we're talking about. And the truth is that unless we are explicit about support of the LGBTQ community, that closeted athlete is going to assume that we're not talking about them, that we're not actually talking about their experience. So it's about being proactive and being intentional in our language and what we do. And people are doing it, but we have to keep our foot on the gas, because this is not, the beginning of the end. It's really the end of the beginning in so many sports spaces.
You said the word vulnerability, and that's one of the words that I kind of had in mind when I was listening to Nora speak about her experience, and even Ruba, when you were talking about Pride Night, it's a little bit of show of vulnerability. So, what do we think we can do better in our sports spaces to allow people to have that vulnerable moment, but then also reinforce that it's a team and it's a positive environment? How do we make sure that happens? And this can be for anyone.
Well, I'll just quickly step in.
Yeah, jump in.
I agree with we need to be vulnerable, but I also have evolved into thinking, like, this is a bunch of bullshit. Like, these are bigoted, evil bullies, and at some point, people boycott. I mean, you say, I'm not going to go to the University of Arizona game, whatever it is, where there are LGBT students who are being harassed. And it may be that I like the idea of sort of people coming together and being nice to each other. But to me, there is a way that bigotry works. And it's also aligned with this fervent evangelical Christianity, where people are praying before games at public institutions. Now, anyone who's grown up in those evangelical circles have been taught most homophobic things, and so students are triggered. It's very complicated. So I think what I like is, let's fight. Like, march, boycott. Enough already. Okay, I'll stop.
Nora, I don't disagree with you. I think it's a both and, right? I think that the way in which we, basically the pace of progress is not distributed equally, right? There are some spaces where amazing work is being done, and other places where it feels like, I think, the culture is moving backwards. I mean, when it comes to the relationship between faith-based communities and the queer community, there's been an erosion of safe spaces for queer athletes nationally. There's 75 Division I NCAA institutions that are faith affiliated, right? I think 11 of them have either sought or received Title IX exemptions on faith-based grounds. So, and I think this is changing under the Biden administration, but under the previous administration, a faith-based university could discriminate against an LGBTQ student and retroactively appeal for Title IX exemption. So you're not wrong. It's like in some instances that we do need to fight, and we do need to really be unflinching in what we stand for and believe in as a committed community. I think the challenge, though, is that when we look at the dynamics of a team is a complex group of people who occupy a whole spectrum of opinions on a whole variety of social justice issues. So, to my mind, the question is, how do we create athletic institutions in which there can be a broad spectrum of opinion, but the experience within that is as welcoming and inclusive and as affirming as all of the athletes as possible. And it's very, when we talk faith, it's very challenging because, it's like you reach this checkmate very quickly in faith-based arguments. It's like, well, that's my sincerely held religious belief. So, and I guess where we always land as an organization is like, regardless of your faith-based belief, you never need to use a homophobic slur. You never need to resort to violence or discrimination. So I think there are ways in which we can both fight and, hopefully create that vulnerability and that inclusivity.
I completely agree. And I also think, something that is getting involved with Athlete Ally and like understanding the purpose of building this athletic space and inclusive space for athletes to congregate, but also understanding that, why we're all there, and thinking of like, WashU's chapter of Athlete Ally started a letter and got 550 student athletes to sign to push the NCAA to not hold competition in states with trans exclusionary legislation, which, understanding that there's a reason we're all a part of this organization and what we're fighting for, and also being able to hold the space for people to come together and feel like they can confide in one another, whether you're part of the queer community or an ally. And also equality of the team sport. I remember getting into Athlete Ally and understanding like that's a slogan and it's a great headline, but there's depth to that.
This past summer, there were so many athletes, professional athletes, addressing racial justice. And even for them, the feedback was shut up and play. So when we're looking at athletes who are cisgendered and professional at the height of their game, getting that kind of feedback, how can we support queer athletes and the LGBT community as they try to fight and push for the same thing and make some progress?
Maybe I'm just going because maybe we're going like that, but I always think of Kamala Harris's mother. She told little Kamala, don't let anybody tell you who you are. I always tell my students that, and especially for gay people. We're always told who we are by everybody. You like this, you want to wear this, you're going to vote for this, you're going to swim here, you're going to wear that. No, we have the power. And I say that for people of color, for all of us who have been marginalized and suffered bigotry. We know who we are. And stop asking other people to define us. Once we can grab that, and young people are amazing. Young people are much better than I was when I was young. They understand more. Plus, they're much less kind of, you're gay, you're straight. It's much more fluid, much more human. So that's better too. But I would say to every individual, be true to yourself and don't let anyone define who you are.
Ruba, you mentioned the equality is a team sport, and one of our other kind of like slogans is victory through unity. And I think both are really trying to get at this idea that the entire institution of sport, billions of dollars based off of the labor of very few people, right? And if we actually could figure out how to better educate and activate athletes to speak in one voice in support of each other, literally there's nothing that they can't do. I watched this documentary about the basketball players. I think it was in the 90s, who was like top couple high school basketball recruits all chose to go to the same college. And it like kind of blew my mind, because I was like, whoa, I feel like as an athlete, we're taught this story of like, it's us versus them, right? And that them is another athlete. But really, if athletes were just all kind of united and like saw each other's liberation tied to each other, there's again, like there's nothing that we can't accomplish. So to my mind, the way in which we do this work is we build a bigger tent. We have to actually educate and show up for our peers of color, for those athletes fighting for pay equity, for Athlete Ally. We did a huge push on overturning the hijab ban in international basketball. The medal payouts for Paralympic athletes is outrageous. There are so many disparate there's so much equity gaps across sport. And if we could just find ways of creating solidarity, I mean, even if we look at women's sports, greater sharing of contracts, and there's so many Olympic athletes who are hurt by the isolation of not being part of a team, not being part of a community. So Nich, I think my answer to your question is that we do it through victory, through unity, that we find ways of collaborating and sharing and partnering with one another across social justice issues. And if we do that, if the army gets big enough, the sport governing bodies will listen. They will have to listen, because there is no TV deal, there is no ticket sales if the athletes don't play.
And I think there's such a, now more than ever, like a focus on intersectionality is so imperative. And exactly what you're saying, Hudson, across social justice movements, whatever, cause or position that you're fighting for, I think in isolation, it's not going to work. And I think that's also what's so important about the message of being an ally and showing up. And even if you don't identify as whatever, if you don't feel like that, you can join, the minority club. If you can understand the privilege of your words and your voice, whoever it is, then that's obviously going to make such an incredible impact. And I think, fighting for racial justice this summer really just highlighted this more than ever, that in terms of pushing for anything, if you're not fighting for people beyond your own self, then no good change is going to come about. And I think if you're going to fight for one thing, you can't ground yourself just in that.
Nora, you picked up on that when you were at your first NCAA conference. And so what does the landscape look like now that you see compared to where it was? And what excites you about the changes that are happening? Because there is a lot of growth in this space to create more inclusive spaces.
Well, generally, I've taught young people now for almost 30 years. And so I see growth in terms of acceptance. But I do see a problem, which is that even institutions with goodwill who really care about inclusion and diversity, honestly, are not doing enough. or there are little statements about we care about diversity and inclusion, and then the committees and things, but they're not really doing enough, because on every panel, on everything that an institution is doing, should have people of color, should have women, should have non-gender, should have queers, that's where things are going to change. So what I would say is, yes, it's gotten better, but they've also figured out ways to kind of keep us in our place a little still, because people with power want to keep power. Queers, generally artists, people color, we have suffered so much, we don't play along. So I would really hope that people in power and all of us fight. I mean, honestly, like lawsuits. What's wrong with a good old lawsuit? I mean, I took on the entire Italy. Italy would not give us my adoption for my child. I found an attorney. We sued. And 4 years later, they said, okay. I mean, I just hope that we don't get complacent. That's my concern. We have so much work to do. People are suffering. People are really suffering in the closet right now.
On the collegiate front, I would say Athlete Ally just actually put out I think a really, really, really good resource for folks. It's called the Athletic Equality Index, where we rank and report the policies and practices of every Division I college in the country. So if you go to aei.athleteally.org, you can look up the policies and practices of every Division I school and compare them with one another. One of, I think, our organizing principles is that with transparency comes accountability. And that, I think if you just put out there into the world, like, hey, here's what these institutions are doing and are not doing, take a look. You find that there's all of a sudden a real urgency to be more accountable, more proactive in support for diverse student athletes. So the AEI looks at, we have 8 metrics. It's non-discrimination policy, trans-inclusive policy for student athletes, sexual harassment policy, fan code of conduct, LGBTQ educational resources. Do you provide training for staff? Do you provide training for athletes? And are you partnering with your LGBTQ campus center in some way? So I'll be very clear, this is not measuring climate. This is not to say that there aren't LGBTQ athletes having an amazingly positive experience in a school that lacks all of these things. But when we look at the indicators of inclusion, something has to be measurable, right? And to our mind, the policy and practice is the best foundation that an athletic institution can invest in to support the full diversity of their constituents. So so check out the AEI, aei.athleteally.org to see. I think Columbia is at a 75, which honestly is not bad in the grand scheme of things. I mean, there's many, many, many institutions that have zeros. So Columbia is good, but can always be better. And what we found is that it takes very little effort to get some of these policies changed. So you just really need to get the right 3 people on a call and you get 100.
Ruba, I have a question for you. I want to know, when you see these policy changes happen or you hear about programming at Columbia, how does it make you feel as an out student athlete who's involved? How does that impact you?
Yeah, greatly so. I think specifically, firstly, just to touch on the Athletic Equality Index, I think that's, having that sort of measuring field is so interesting, and seeing, the institutions want to be ahead of the other, and, who then shows up to get all these box checked is really interesting, and what is actually behind that. But in terms of the programming at Columbia, maybe I just wasn't aware, but I wouldn't have expected a panel like this to have happened even in my first year. And so having the opportunity to bring voices together and people together. You know, more often than not, it's under the sort of title of diversity and inclusion. But when you can foster authentic and meaningful conversation, makes me feel, you know, really valued and heard. And it just, you know, we're talking about inclusive spaces. It just opens them up, because the more that you hear and the more that you learn, you know, the more that you can do with that. That was very broad, but you know, that's the sentiment.
Have you seen a change in your cisgendered straight teammates because of those policies and your interaction with them on your team?
I mean, the conversation is just bigger. So I'd say, yeah, I think like my first year, I mean, even just with Athlete Allies presence, like, you know, it was 2 women's rowers, me and Anna, that started the chapter last year. And now I'd say majority of our team is on the roster, and majority of them, you know, probably straight cisgendered women. And so what is so interesting about that is that opening up that space and expanding it and making it a very clear point that this is for members of the LGBTQ community, but this is also for allies. And so if you feel like you can show up for your friends and teammates, why wouldn't you? And I think that's the biggest change, is seeing it become more of a conversation and more of something that everyone wants to be a part of. And that, you know, the more popular it gets, I think the more that you can do with that. Yeah.
That's really powerful. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about intersectionality, and this conversation we've just had is reminding me that, you know, presently in Georgia, there are a lot of corporations stepping up to address voting right issues. So do you see a relationship between what's happening with corporations and what we'd like to see happen within athletics and professional teams, collegiate teams? Hudson, I think you've had some experience. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think it's very much related. Look, when you lack political power, you have to use other levers to make things happen, right? And economics is a really important lever, especially in and around the business of sport. So, you know, I think what we're seeing in Georgia right now is a continuation and a part of, you know, the NBA pulled their All-Star game out of North Carolina over HB2, sort of the most egregious anti-LGBTQ bills that a state had passed up until that point. You know, I think we're seeing there be more embedding of human rights into the consideration of where business is done. Now, you know, the cynic in me wants to say it's still, you know, maybe partly PR. It's a good marketing look, but you know, as an athlete, like, and as a coach, I care about, like, how do we win, right? How do we actually get the job done? How do we actually create a strategy and a plan that is effective? And the truth is that money talks. And every time you know, if the NCAA doesn't award a Final Four championship to a city or state because that state has put in place anti-LGBTQ legislation, or because they're still, you know, flying the Confederate flag or not honoring Martin Luther King Day, you know, these are all decisions that the NCAA has made in the past, and it has impact. It actually results in those policies getting changed. So, you know, I think for me, like, the big punchline of it is that every institution has core values, right? It has some stated belief about who they are, what they believe in, what they want the world to look like. I think until relatively recently, there's been very little. Sorry, that's my mom. There's been very little alignment between your values and your actual actions, your policies and your practices. And so I think it's a great sign that what we're seeing in Georgia is a part of a larger conversation. Athlete Ally, we're doing a lot of work right now around the 2026 World Cup bid, trying to get there to be clear human rights sort of guidelines into who gets to host those championships and events. We have the World Cup coming to Qatar in 2022, a lot of human rights issues there. So anytime there's a top sponsor, anytime there's huge money moving in and through sport, there's a lever to be pulled to make the world a better place for the people in it.
I feel like one of those challenges in places like that, it can be really hard for an athlete who might be out already to then go compete in a place where it may not be safe. Well, what do you, Nora, I feel like that might have been part of your experience from what you shared earlier. It was a little hard to go out. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe your teammates or the environment, or what helped you push through some of those experiences?
Oh, my teammates, I love my teammates. I mean, my teammates are always, we're so close. I think that basketball probably saved my life on some level, because there was so much homophobia and self-hate and self-loathing and nowhere to go. And my family and everyone, that the team was safe. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to respond. Ruba said something interesting. And also I wanted to say to Hudson also, this summer, the Black Spring, very important. I was out there at the Wall of Moms, I had my yellow t-shirt. We marched BLM, Black Lives Matter. We sang, we chanted. And this is in Portland, Oregon, which has become, like ground zero for attack. And it reminded me of what Ruba said, because those moms were never particularly active. Oh, I've been active my whole life, but not my neighbors down the street. Moms weren't. And they were getting hit with tear gas, and they were getting hit with pepper spray, and we all went to get masks and everything. And I think that's what's happened, is there is like certain people now are just not going to, like, it's not like the big lie has been exposed for many of us, and many people didn't see the big lie that somehow white straight people are the best. I mean, it's just been exposed even to the moms and people who weren't active. So I think that's very hopeful. And to know that Ruba and her pals on the rowing team are involved, and Hudson, I mean, thank you, Hudson. I mean, you're talking to people, you're making things happen. Like, so I kind of see that all as the Wall of Moms. Like, you guys all woke up, and hopefully more and more people will join and say, for everyone, bigotry is not acceptable.
As we begin to wind down here, I would like to ask, I'll go each one by one, 1 year from now, we're coming out of the pandemic, and there's this opportunity to restart our teams and programs in a place and really confront this idea of creating an inclusive space. So 1 year from now, what would you like to see happening in your respective department, team, or an athlete ally? I'll start with Nora. Let's go ahead and hear from you. What would you like to see 1 year from now?
Oh, that's such a nice question. First, I want to thank you, Nick. Well, 1 year from now, I am on sabbatical. And you know what I'm doing? I'm rewriting my entire curriculum. Music history is based on a big lie. So now I'm going to change the curriculum to elevate Florence Price and William Grant Still and Meredith Monk and all those people have been put. So what I would like a year from now, that our movement becomes more and more just.
I love that. I love that. As a music student, I would have loved to learn more about that in my own education. So I'm glad to see it happening. Hudson, let's hear from you and Athlete Allies work.
It's a really good question. With Athlete Ally, there's all these we have all these really big targets in mind, right? All these really big goals, kind of like moonshot goals that we're always kind of striving for, which I think we never lose sight of, right? It's trying to get more people educated, right? Trying to build a better baseline of understanding when it comes to LGBTQ issues in sport. Trying to create more accountability in the sport policies that exist within sport governing bodies at the state and local level. It's more athlete activism, right? Like we want to live in a world in which athlete activism is both accepted and expected. So I want more athletes to be using their platform intentionally and purposefully. So there are all these like very specific strategic ways in which we hope that happens a year from now. But I think what I would say to the folks watching is that I think a lot of really powerful progress happens over a kitchen table. And I think we can't underestimate how important that is. So what I would hope a year from now is, I think it looks like we have 80 participants. My hope is that everyone here would pick the social justice issue which you feel least knowledgeable about, and commit to reading a book, watching a movie, listening to a podcast, whatever your medium is of liking to get better informed, commit to it, right? Like, I think we're only as effective as we are knowledgeable. So pick that social justice issue which you feel maybe most uncomfortable with. And then second, pick 3 people in your life to talk to about it, to just have that kind of authentic, organic conversation. Doesn't have to be neat, it can be very messy, but I think we need to have more of those difficult dialogues in order for this work to progress.
And
Yeah.
Ruba.
Sorry, yes. I think on the Athlete Ally chapter front, I really would love to see 1 year from now to have at least one member or representative from every varsity team at Columbia. I think that would be really powerful and hopefully achievable. And, you know, I obviously want to see the community grow and expand and, you know, partner with other campus groups. You know, while we do have the sort of incredible hub of Columbia Athletics sort of expanding onto the campus and, you know, really confronting the change that we can push for, even if we can't enact it all ourselves. You know, student athletes obviously have such an incredible platform and position, but we can't do it all. And so bridging the administration and the work that groups like Athlete Ally hopefully will continue to do, I think is vital. And I just wanted to remember that I went to the Action Awards. Athlete Ally has Action Awards. I got to go last year, which was incredible, and seeing all the, you know, professional athletes who are ambassadors who I got to meet and sort of get a sense of like this community that we're joining. And I remember Ali Krieger was accepting one of the awards and was explaining how, you know, she never wants an athlete to have to decide between playing their sport and being proud of who they are. So I just really want that message to be shouted from the rooftops.
That is beautiful and absolutely a message we need to hear. For those who don't know more about Athlete Ally, from my own athletes experience, some of that training and conversation has helped them navigate those messy conversations. So if you're getting ready to engage in a conversation and bring them in, that's a resource for you that I would highly recommend so that it can be a productive, positive conversation. I want to take this time to thank all of our panelists for joining us and taking some time to talk about this. And most importantly, to engage so authentically and really share. It's so important. Thank you again to the leadership from our university, all the way from up top, and from Peter for introducing it. And with that, we'll say goodnight and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.